Hello, bicycle touring friends. This is Bicycle Touring Talk, and I'm happy to welcome you to episode 114. My name is Jorg Schlagheck, and we're cycling across Canada. Well, I'm sharing my stories and experiences from such a tour that I did several years ago. After I had my handyman truck stolen a few weeks ago, a fellow Canadian cyclist recently commented that maybe now I'd have time to cycle across Canada again. Believe me, it's on my mind. There's nothing quite like arriving on the East Coast after months of riding. Last time I told you about crossing the Confederation Bridge. In a van, unfortunately. That was Thursday, August 17th, 2017. Once on Prince Edward Island, I first stopped at the visitor center to get a map and some info. I had to wait in line, but I was eager to find and ride the Confederation Trail. It was easy enough to find and in very good condition. This was just like Quebec, and I had the trail all to myself.
There at the visitor center, I had to stand in line. There were so many people, but they're all in cars. So it's actually a good thing, to be the only one on the bike, because I got peace and quiet here, and so far it looks like it's going to be a nice ride today.
It would have been a fantastic ride, but the wind was very strong and changing directions all the time. It was hard to tolerate, and it soon started wearing down on me. Then there was this infamous little gray cloud threatening to let it rain again. Luckily, there were just a few sprinkles here and there, but it was far from comfortable. I had lunch at a picnic shelter that was somewhat protected from the wind, but cooking was still a challenge. Later in the afternoon, I met another cyclist who had also been on the road since May. We talked a bit about our tours, and it turned out that he had just explored parts of the Maritimes. Canada is huge, and cycling coast to coast is just one of the ways you can explore it by bike. You probably get to see a lot more by focusing on one region for a while. Then I got to Charlottetown and was suddenly very hungry. Where was I gonna stop? I decided on a Subway restaurant and had a foot-long sandwich combo. It was perfect. The internet didn't work well at Subway, so I went for coffee at McDonald's after stopping at the superstore to get some groceries for the trail. Finding the way through Charlottetown was not easy. The trails seemed to be well marked and go right across, only to disappear numerous times. At the end, it led me back to a park where a sign indicated that a connection was missing.
Undeveloped temporary connector route. But where is it? Well, anyways, gotta go back. I'm cheesed. I'm pissed off, really. This is frustrating.
To leave town, I had to take the highway. But that was poorly marked, so I ended up running circles around neighborhoods and asking several people before being sent onto the Trans-Canada Highway. Canadian cities seem to be all the same, no matter what province they're in. There are 6-lane roads everywhere, packed with cars, and they're a nightmare to cross by bike or on foot. Charlottetown was no exception. eventually found the trailhead, and it was a bit of a relief. I lost a lot of time. I had to find a place to camp almost right away. Only a couple of kilometers down the way, I found a suitable spot behind some trees, bordering a field. It was almost dark when I settled into my tent. At least the wind had died down and it was easy to fall asleep. Then it was Friday, August 18th. When I woke up, my tent was wet from condensation, but as is typical for stealth camping, I knew that I had to get going before the sun would get a chance to dry it properly. After packing up all my stuff, I only went down the trail for about 2 kilometers and found a picnic shelter to have breakfast. I had 2 sandwiches and 3 eggs, almost the exact same meal as the previous morning, except that I had to make my own coffee. The going was tough at first. The Confederation Trail used to be a railway, and as is typical, there are no really steep hills, but instead there are subtle, long, hard inclines. They're barely perceptible, unless of course you're riding a heavily loaded bicycle. I tended to think that maybe I was just really weak and tired all of a sudden. But then the grade changed and I was going really fast without any effort. The route was all trail, all the way to Wood Islands and the ferry to Nova Scotia. It was a great ride overall, mostly through forest. My timing was just about perfect. There was going to be a ferry at 1 o'clock and I was at the terminal a few minutes past 12. After paying for the ticket, I treated myself to an ice cream. Hey, I had to celebrate. I had passed another province on my journey eastward. Then there wasn't even enough time to try out the free Wi-Fi at the terminal building. As a cyclist, I got to go onto the ferry first. There were 2 big cylinders about 2 feet tall at the front right side of the parking deck. They were okay to lean the bike. For added security, I used my cable lock and a couple of bungees. The ride on the holiday island went smooth and fast. I found a charging station for my phone and camera. There was barely enough time to get a full charge. Toward the end of the ride, a man in a cycling outfit sat down next to me. He introduced himself as Bill, and it turned out that he too was on a bicycle tour across Canada. It was his 3rd one, he told me. We had much to talk about. All the while he was trying to get his phone to work that he had taken out of a bag of rice. It must have gotten wet somewhere.
Oh no!
I lost track of Bill when the ferry was about to dock. The ride into Pictou was nothing but straight highway. Even though it was surrounded by water on both sides at some point, it was hardly pretty. At least the smooth, paved shoulder made for a quick ride. I stopped at the visitor center for route information and lunch at one of their picnic tables. There was a Sobeys and a Tim Hortons across the traffic circle. I visited both before continuing my ride. The first 20 kilometers were on the Trans-Canada Highway, an expressway designed for cars and trucks. The shoulder felt okay to ride on, but it wasn't a pleasant ride. The scenery actually was quite ugly, despite the hills and forests around the freeway. An expressway is a sure way to spoil any beautiful environment. Eventually, I reached an exit that indicated access to Route 4, a secondary road that runs parallel. I took it without hesitation. So I'm about, I guess 20 some odd kilometers into Nova Scotia. Just the pavement jungle. But I'm getting off here and there's supposed to be a secondary highway over there, number 4. Hopefully that'll be nice.
No trail here so far. From what I heard, there is none. I just have to follow the secondary highway.
It turned out to be a bit of a detour before turning east again, but it was worth it. The road was not too busy and much nicer than the highway. There wasn't much of a shoulder to speak of, and some hills were rather steep, but it was a more scenic ride. I remembered that my tent hadn't completely dried that morning. I would have no choice but to set up a bit earlier than usual. For lack of an official campground, I started looking for hidden spots along the road. I eventually found one just outside of French River. There were no signs, but vehicle access to the place was blocked by a fallen tree. It was easy enough to get the bike over it and find a good campsite. I cooked chili while the tent was drying and had supper sitting on a fallen tree branch. Nobody came and only a few cars rolled by on the road 100 meters down. I'd be able to spend a quiet night here. After washing up, I pitched the tent. It was done just before dark and even dried sufficiently. I fell asleep shortly after crawling in there. I had made it to Nova Scotia, and it didn't even seem like a big deal. The tour was slowly nearing its end. Nova Scotia is the easternmost province on the mainland. It would take another ferry ride to get to Newfoundland, but I had to make it there first. More about it next week in the next episode. See you then.